And on today's show, we have a very, as I take it from the IMDb page, happily married father of three that while in the daylight, he's a mild-mannered sign and logo creator who has a knack for making many designs come to life. But at night, he dons the headphone, and steps in front of his microphone to become the podcast guy. Everybody, please welcome to the show, Mr. Tim Beisiegel.
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Yay,
Let's go.
me.
Yay! Give a round of applause, everybody. we'll put that in post. We'll do the round of applause. But yeah, Tim, thank you so much for stopping by on the show today. Glad to have you with us.
Oh, I'm glad to be here.
Awesome, fantastic. So Tim, that you mentioned that you are a man behind the mic and you are a graphic designer, if I can call it that. So,
Sure.
Of course, now that's probably being the man behind the mic has got to be a lot more fun than maybe you do drawing and design than anything else. But you also have not one, not two, but three podcasts with varying degrees of topics. So I guess I can safely say that you never run out of anything to talk about, right?
No, actually, I don't. I probably talk far too much, and this is a safe way to keep my marriage going, is that I go talk to other people so I don't drive my wife insane.
Well, and I guess I say, what is it? Friendship is cheaper than therapy. A friend is a free therapist. The therapist $250. So,
well, it's funny because I say that about my first show, which is called Focused on Forward. I always say that's the cheapest therapy I've ever had.
Nice.
Because I talk to people who are overcoming things and they're all these different challenges and obstacles in their life, how they've got through them and all that kind of stuff. But for me, it was like, I was working through some stuff when I started it. That's why I started it. And so, and I got to this point where I was like, oh, and I started taking notes, man. I'm like, oh, this guy did that. Oh, let's try that. Oh, that sounds like that's really cool. Yeah, we'll do that. Yeah, so it became honestly the cheapest form of therapy I've ever had. And so, yeah, I talked to people about what they're going through and ended up using some or all of it myself.
Well, that's awesome. Well, and we will definitely go over all that about your podcast, what you do. But before we get into it, we do got to talk about our sponsor. And of course, that is going to be this network coin, the FoxD coin. FoxD coin is a totally community-driven coin, no pre-mining, no developer's wallet, so nothing where the coin is held behind some secret shadow wall. FoxD is completely 100% transparent and is open to everybody, making it a coin that is for the people and by the people. The unique advantage of the FoxD coin is that it offers what we're utilizing right now, and that is the FoxD network. Coin gives everybody the opportunity to get seen on our network, and of course gives your content a chance to shine with your audience growing along with the network's growth. We're always accepting new guests, streamers, and contributors to the network. So if you do want to expand on your brand, then you know what to do. Check us out on our website at foxdcoin.com. That is Fox, F-O-X, the letter D, coin.com, where you can download all of your wallets, or where you can download our wallet. Or if you want to check us out and buy some coins yourself, you can see us on Bilaxy, Crex24, BitSales, FX, and Free Exchange. So now that we got it out of the way, so tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself. Kind of give us the who's who of who you are, kind of where you're from, your background, kind of, just introduces yourself to the class.
Sure. Hi, I'm Tim. I'm a
Hi, Tim. Welcome to AA, everybody. It's okay.
Exactly. I have a podcasting addiction. That's actually probably.
Oh no, accurate. It's okay. We're all here.
So let's see. I'm 44 years old. I've been married for 23 years, and I have three beautiful kids from that marriage. My wife should possibly be anointed for sainthood because she's put up with me for so long.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not just saying that because she'll probably see this at some point.
Right.
And just in case, love you, honey.
Right.
And
I love you, dear. I totally crossed my heart.
Exactly. Smooches. And no, I honestly do feel that way. She's an amazing woman. She's very patient with me because I know I'm not an easy person to live with. I'm not even close. I'm a very opinionated person, and that comes out a lot. And so, especially in a marriage, especially when you get comfortable with somebody, you start talking, and it becomes easier for you to say some of the things that you might not say to somebody else because,
yes,
hey, you've been putting up with me for this long. Let's see how this one flies.
Right.
I'm not saying that has or hasn't happened. But yeah, let's see. Yeah, I live in a little town in western Michigan called Newaygo. We have approximately, I think, 8,500 people in the town, based on the last census. But we're not too far from Lake Michigan, so we spend a lot of time over at the lake, and
Oh,
and
cool.
uh, that's basically uh, Michigan's ocean. So
Now, do you have
uh,
like the lake house, the boat, the 6-car garage? Kind of like these, celebrities that have the lake houses.
no, I can't even afford to get you shoot step in their driveway for the people who did live on the lake. Are you kidding me? Wow. I wish. I mean, there's some pristine spots on Lake Michigan that
Oh,
if
for
I
sure.
that I've told my wife, if I don't play the lottery, but if I ever did win the lottery for some unforsaken reason, if that ever did happen, I know exactly what house I'd be walking right up to. Be like, yeah, here's your money, get out. I want this house. Um, you know, just some beautiful spots, but
Right.
we live on a little lake here in our town, and you know, so we swim and fish on this lake, and it's a little all seasons, all sports lake. Nothing major, nothing fancy, but it's home and it's comfortable.
It's kind of like, the Americana idea of, having that, by the lake sort of stuff.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so we've lived here for out of the 23 years of marriage, I would say at least 18 of them. I grew up in
Wow.
this area, got married to my wife who lived across state. She was over by the Thumb in Michigan, because I can
Hmm.
say that for Michigan, we're the state. She
Right.
lived over here. I lived over here. So can't do that with any other state. Suck it, Wisconsin. You're
Uh,
not cool. Um, we are the mitten state.
but it's
And
the cute mitten state.
right, exactly. Wisconsin tries to say that they're mitten, but it's not really.
It's more like an oven glove, I guess. I mean, kind
Hmm.
of.
More like a table mat that has had like the thumb cut out of it,
Yes.
to
Yes.
make it look like a mitten.
Or
Um,
it could be a mitten, but it's like, when kids do those crafts in kindergarten, they can't actually cut in a straight circle. So it's that little like,
so you get that
you know,
or they did the trace around the fingers. They got that one that went way out here, you know.
yeah.
And no matter what, because they're your child and you love them, you tell them it's pretty. So yeah,
It's very nice, Timmy.
exactly. Oh, you did such a good job. So, but yeah, we've been living here for quite a while. We enjoy it, and during the day, my dad and I run a small sign shop.
Mhm.
We basically focus on contractors and local businesses,
Right.
but I like to design silly things, and I'm a bit of a nerd and sports fanatic, as you may see from the wall behind me. But I started a secondary company called River City Tees, where I started going out and putting just my designs online.
Mhm.
And I think right now I have approximately 740 designs online,
Wow.
for people to be able to choose from whatever it may be. So
Right. Well,
so
talking about with your oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you're fine. I was just going to say that it's just it, it was something to do that was different than what we were doing at the day job, because the day
Mhm.
job was all serious, and and I take pride in what I do here,
Right.
but it wasn't the creative release where I got to do something that I was like, not that I'm not proud of my other work, don't take it that way, but in
Oh,
some of it
for
I was like,
sure, yeah.
where I was like, oh man, I can't believe. All right, let's see if we can get this to go. I hope somebody buys this. This is really cool, that
Mhm.
kind of thing. You know.
Right, exactly. Well, and and speaking of like being the design artist during the day and podcast at night, what does your typical day look like between both of those? Like, what kind of got you into doing graphic design, and then kind of what got you into doing podcasting, and how do you balance both of those as well?
All right, so let's start with what got me into it. So my dad started a company called Vital Signs when I was back in 1982.
Hmm.
And he was doing it for lots of years. He took a few years off while I was in high school, because he wanted us to have health care and a few other things until I got out of school.
Sure.
I actually about my middle school year. So he took about a 5-6 year sabbatical from it, but he was still doing it on the side, or where we were doing more vehicle graphics at that time. Because back in the late 80s, early 90s, vehicle graphics were a very popular thing. I mean, there were times we'd show up at a dealership with pinstripe kits, and I'd go into the office, say, I'm going to stripe those 20 cars. They're like, yep, do it. And
Wow.
you'd walk out because pinstripes were popular.
Oh
Now
yeah, of
pinstripes aren't.
course.
Now they're not. It's kind of one of those passing phases, and I think it'll probably circle back. But
everything always does. Fashion always comes
yeah,
around, every 20 years or something, they say?
exactly. So we just got to wait for it to circle back, but it'll come back around. But we started getting into more of the sign work in the early 90s. And at the time, I was a kid. It was just a job. I didn't care.
Right.
I was like, yeah, I couldn't, I'm from a small town. I couldn't wait to get out of Nuevo. I'm like, man, this town is, when you're a teenager, the town that you live in, when it's a small town, is the most boring place on the face of the planet. Nothing cool ever happens here. It's boring.
Grew up in a small town here, man. It was the small town I grew up in only had 1,000 people. No joke. And It was one of those, one strip through the middle of town. Most exciting thing to do, Friday night football. That was the only thing we really had.
Yeah. I didn't want to live in a town where I felt like I was in the TV show Cheers, where everybody knew my name. I didn't like that, man. We go into the store with my dad, and he'd get stopped every couple of feet because everybody knew him because, and I was like, oh God, this is ridiculous. Can't even go get a bag of chips and a soda in a gas station because, somebody wants to stop and talk to my dad.
Like, should take a 30-second transaction, get soda and chips, get back in the car. No, it takes 15 minutes because, hey, Dale, I haven't seen you. How's the kids doing?
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, tell me about how's work? And then there's that whole discussion, and so I moved out. I got married pretty young. I was 21 when I got married. I just knew that she was the one, and I didn't, and she still is, and we've been very happy. But I started selling door hardware across state in the Flint area. So I was going around to factories and schools and churches and all these different buildings and trying to help them fix their door closers and the crash bars on the doors where people were supposed to go through with their hands, but they use their feet or their backpacks to swing into them. And
or whatever was available.
Pretty much, yeah. And so I did that for about 15 years.
Wow.
I sold door hardware for about 15 years. And I was very good at it, very successful at it. And actually 13 years, excuse me. I'm off on my math here a little bit. It was about 13 years. And in Michigan, there was, actually all across the nation, there was a recession. And I was working for a small company that was family owned, and it was not my family. So when the recession hit and people started losing their jobs, I had the wrong last name. And I completely understandable. And if I was in the owner's position, I would protect my family first too. I held no ill will towards him for that. But actually it ended up being a blessing in disguise because I ended up realizing that I had a heart condition at the same time. So, I started realizing while I was working there that it's one of those things where you don't know what's going on, but something's not quite right.
Yeah, you always know your body, and when something's like, hey, my heart hurts, my legs hurt, something.
Right, something's wrong. Should probably get this checked out. So anyway, I ended up with a condition called it's atrial fibrillation, but I had a severe case of atrial fibrillation. It went from atrial fibrillation is where the your heart beats out of sinus rhythm. And so it just you could watch my chest and you could watch my chest shake like that. Wow. So my whole chest would shake. Right, but it went from being like once in a great while to going to the point where before I got it fixed, the last year of getting it having it before I got it fixed, I was laid up in my house. I couldn't walk from one end of the house to the other without being exhausted. This thing was going off about 15 to 20 times a day, anywhere from 20 minutes to 30 minutes at a time. Wow. I had to have my heart chemically stopped and reset 6 times that year.
Whoa.
Yeah, that's That's always the catcher right there. Your reaction is not uncommon.
Oh no.
And yeah, you should react like that because that's a big one.
Yeah.
But I had a procedure about 7 years ago and been fine since. But
Well, I'm glad you're
yeah,
healthy and back to getting on it, obviously.
yeah. And so when I came out of that, because I couldn't work for my dad during that time, when I came out of that, um, the only issue that I have now yet, like residual from that, is that
Mm-hmm.
I have stamina issues, and keeping
Right.
up with stamina is tends to be a problem at times.
Mm-hmm.
Just because you're, even though I almost said it in Boston accent, my heart got hot wired. Should have been here for the show, folks.
Right, exactly.
But anyway, my heart got hot wired, basically is how I explain it. But ever since then, it works. It does what it's supposed to. But I just don't have the stamina that I used to.
Right.
So going back to work 60 to 80 hours a week doing what I used to do wasn't going to be an option. So I started working for my dad part-time, and I had a couple of my daughter, who was pretty young at the time,
Sure.
only about 4 or 5 years old. I decided, you know what, I'm going to stay home and be a full-time dad. I'm going to work part-time for
Cool.
for my dad, and I'll be a full-time dad. So we had to make some adjustments in life and how we were doing and what we were doing because,
Right.
But I started working for him and started learning how to use the design software. I can't draw with pen and paper to save my soul. Anything.
Neither can I. Trust me, my stick figures. No.
Oh, I'm jealous. You can make a stick figure. Which, if anybody's listening, this is not going to instill confidence of using me for graphic design. But the computer does all the work. I don't have to. But yeah, so I've relied pretty heavily on like Adobe Illustrator and things like that to help me
for sure
get my work done, because otherwise everything would look like a square or an oval, and it would just be a mess.
Well, or nowadays with the whole abstract art stuff, it's like,
I might be hot. Who knows?
Dog? You're like, yeah, sure, it's a dog. Yeah.
Modern day freaking Picasso over here. I might have a shot at this.
Sell it for $2 million at like those art shows where it's 2 lines, but
that would be ridiculous.
What does it mean to you?
But what did you draw it in? Magic marker. Oh my God, it's magic.
And then you could also get tax write-off for that stuff, get all that, $2 million and like, oh no, I get to keep it all to myself.
Exactly.
So going from the graphic design, now, how did you get into the whole doing the podcast thing? What was kind of the catalyst that made you do, this?
Well, in 2019, my daughter was diagnosed with Guillain-Barré syndrome. And Guillain-Barré syndrome is an autoimmune disease that attacks the central nervous system in the body. Mm-hmm. She ended up being hospitalized for 97 days.
Wow.
33 of those were in the ICU. She was on breathing support. She had a feeding tube.
Right.
She had to have a couple emergency lung procedures. And during her 97 days, my wife and I never left the hospital. When we came out, my head was a bag of cats. And so I started, I put off mental health help. I put off putting, going, and because, growing up in America, you can understand it. Men are taught that we don't need to share our emotions, talk about our feelings. It's not the manly thing to do. Suck it up.
Through it.
Yeah, just push through it. Nobody cares. Just do what you got to do. And so there was a whole lot of that going on inside my own head. My wife kept suggesting to me, "Hey, you should go talk to somebody. You should go talk to somebody." I'm like, talking to, that's what wussies do. I'm not a wuss. I'm not going to go talk to somebody. And I wish I wouldn't have had that opinion. I wish I wouldn't have had that feeling. But eventually I did. I went and talked to somebody, and she wanted me to write like a journal of my thoughts and feelings every day. And I laughed at her and said, "Well, I'm not a writer. That's not happening." And so I said, "Yeah, that's not happening."
Right.
And then she's like, "Well, what about a video blog?" I'm like, "Where I just sit down and talk to myself on camera the whole time?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "Yeah, that's not happening either." So I was talking to another buddy of mine who's a podcaster, and he has a wonderful show called the Curiosity Hour podcast, and that's
Okay.
hosted by Tommy and Dan. And my buddy Tommy and I were talking, and Tommy suggested that, hey, why don't you try in a podcast form where you talk to other people? And I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to. Nobody's going to want to sit there and listen to me bellyache every week about some new portion of my story that I found to be horrible this time. And I'm like, I can't do that. So he's like, and he's the one who actually helped me formulate the idea for the show, to bring other people in and talk to them about what they were going through, and and how they worked through it and all that kind of stuff. And so so Focused on Forward started from that. I started just me and my iPhone and little headphones, doing the whole TikTok hold the microphone up to your mouth thing.
Humble beginnings.
Yeah, the first couple episodes, rough. Please don't go listen to them, but please go listen to Focus on Forward. Yeah, you can skip the first couple episodes.
It's kind of like in the series, like in TV shows. It's like, listen, you don't really need to watch the first 3 seasons. You kind of do, but don't. But trust me, it gets better by season 4. Trust me.
Exactly. Yeah, the first couple episodes, 2 things were clear. I had no idea about anything to do with sound balance and microphone placement, and I also knew nothing about editing. That was pretty dang clear. Anyway, but yeah, so that's how I got started into that, and it became, and I started doing that in 2020, or early on in 2020, like the other 2.5 million other podcasters who started at the same time as me. And so at that time, though, I was working mainly at home, and so the podcasting life balance was actually pretty easy. Because most of it I was doing from home, and if we did leave, and we had a shop that was separate, so my daughter, who's autoimmune, I had to be very careful, especially with COVID. Sure. I was just coming around my family, my mom and my dad at our shop. Nobody else was allowed in. This was a kind of this was a sacred spot. Our house was a sacred spot. Their house was a sacred spot. Nobody else was allowed in coming or going, unless it was basically the 6 of us. We had 4 people at my house, 2 at my parents' house. Only those 6 people were allowed in those 3 buildings. And it made it easier because that way I could take my daughter to any of those places and not feel like I was putting her in danger.
Oh, well, I was about to say, I was like, with her being like that, I mean, I'm sure there's probably a lot of places that, even maybe still today, you're kind of like, I don't know if we can do this. I don't know if we can do that. Well, this comes up.
Yeah, speaking of that, I got invited to go in Michigan here on the 17th and 18th of September. There's the Monroe Pop Fest, which is a smaller version of a Comic-Con. Nice. And as part of Funny Science Fiction, one of my other podcasts, which we can talk about in a few minutes, sure. I got invited to help run or moderate a few tables there.
Right.
And so my daughter really wants to come, and I bought her a VIP ticket, and I'm only mostly having an anxiety attack about it, but it'll be fine. And we'll get through it.
Well, I say this in jest, just as fun, but kind of like what we do when we were kids, kind of like your mom, like, listen, just take this Bengay, rub it on your chest, drink some Sprite, and you'll be okay. You'll get over it, kid.
Pretty much. I'm just like, she started back at high school this year for the first time in 2 years.
Right.
And the only caveat to that is that she had, because of her condition, she has to wear a mask the whole time she's there. So she is vaccinated, but the only problem is that if somebody else is not, and they've been around somebody else, some extra layer of protection to help her out, because COVID may not kill her, but the effects that it would have on her body would.
Right.
Because she's, after everything that happened in the hospital, she's down to 1 1/4 functioning lungs.
Right. Oh, wow.
And so we have to be extremely cautious and careful about what we do and where we do and why, and all those things. So, and
I completely understand. It's I say I understand in the sense of, I don't have kids personally. I do one day, but from the point of wanting to protect somebody is, that's kind of one of those things.
Sure.
Where, like, my wife has diabetes, and it's one of those things where you do kind of have to be careful about, like, what now it's not one of those things that if she eats like one Jolly Rancher, she's out, but it is one of those things where you do have to kind of, okay, we can't eat at this restaurant. Okay, we can have this, but not this much of that. There's those little things you have to.
You got to learn the balance.
Yeah, exactly. So it's one of those things where it's not that my wife can't have a normal life, but it's one of those things where you do kind of have to work out like, hey, we just can't sit and eat like an entire chocolate cake for, our birthday sort of stuff.
Right.
So,
Right.
oh
No,
my
I
God.
get it. I get it.
Now, one thing too, like you said, you have other podcasts. Now, for the folks at home, tell us, because you have three of them. Tell us
Right.
which ones they are, what they do, kind of their intentions, and also what kind of started all three of those. You did mention about the previous podcast with the health and wellness, but kind of delve deep because you also have a science fiction one and a new one for pop culture. So tell us about each of those, what they do, how they started, and kind of all that jazz.
Right. So I started focused on forward to help me with my own mental health and kind of working through some things and honestly to help me keep my sanity during 2020. It was a way to help, because I'm a very social person, and having the opportunity to talk with other people and interact with them was a very difficult thing for me not to have. So this kind of scratched that itch a little bit, and made it so that I felt like I was still participating in human culture and talking with other humans, and that was all very important to me. Now, at the same time I was doing this, I joined a Facebook group called Funny Science Fiction. That was one of my buddies. His dad had started the group. He's an author and goes by the pen name of Drayton Allen, and he writes these really cool humor-based sci-fi and fantasy type stories. And he had written one called Custodians of the Cosmos.
Oh, that sounds fun.
Yeah, and he started the Facebook group to advertise the genre more than advertising the book. And he, so his hope was that if we advertise the genre, people, he'll slip in some advertisements for his book, everything will play out. And I think it has worked out for him in the most part. But I joined this group, and he's like, hey, you're friends with my son. You want to help me run this group? The group is growing. I need help. So when I joined the group, we had about 40,000 members in the group.
Wow.
Which is a good size Facebook group.
Oh, for sure.
As of this morning, we're at 148,000.
Dude.
So in just over a year, I've helped him grow the group by 100,000 members.
That is very impressive. I mean, seriously, that's amazing.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So thank you. So we've done a lot of work there. The only problem to that is well, I'll get to that in a minute. But so putting the cart.
That's all right.
So I get so excited about talking about things. Sometimes I don't remember what order.
There's so many avenues you want to talk about.
Exactly. So many. There's so much more room for activities. But so he said, you know what, you should interview my other son. His daughter was born, they had challenges. She was in the NICU, and there was all these things going on with that. And I was like, yeah, sure. So I did. And we got done with that, and he listened to the interview, and he says, we should do a podcast for the group. And I was like, and the running joke has been, because this is what I said to him, I got a mic, let's do it. I didn't even think about it, because I was like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. Star Wars, and I've said this, if you listen to any of the podcasts, you'll hear me say this at least once every other episode. Star Wars is like my marriage. It's been there for me in sickness and in health, good times and bad. That series is my go-to, man. That's everything to me. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd. Love it. So we talk about all that kind of stuff on the show, and I was like, and we were talking about all this kind of stuff in the group, and I'm like, this would be great. It's going to be awesome. The only problem we have is that we have created such a community for memes and jokes and everything, is getting them to convert to being podcast listeners. Is all, that's always the big challenge, is getting people to subscribe, getting people to listen, getting people to follow, because there's so many choices out there. But that has recently started to change. We're starting to get more subscribers. That number has been growing. That's been a lot of fun. We talked to people we got a chance to interview Burt Ward, TV's Batman, for TV's Robin from Batman in the 1960s. We've interviewed Jed Brophy, who was in all 6 of the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit movies. We've interviewed Dan Povenmire, who's the co-creator of Phineas and Ferb. You know, Anna Graves, who's the voice actress behind Duchess Satine and Star Wars Clone Wars.
That's
I could go on and on. There's been a whole lot of those.
And we'll have all the links for everybody to check out your YouTube channels and stuff. We'll have the science fiction.
Okay,
YouTube.
cool.
Yeah. And this one thing I was going to ask is, how did you get, the Doofenshmirtz on your channel to be able to, I mean, because normally you'd think, these are big time celebrities. Oh, they would be way too busy. How do you get these people on your show? Really?
I ask.
There's
no, honestly, no, that's it. It's just, I have a simple, sweet email that I send out. It's basically a form email, and just letting them know who I am, what I'm doing, the type of show that I run, and assuring them that this is not any type of, gotcha type of format or anything like that. We're looking to have a good time. I want to share laughs with these guys. That's the whole point of this. And so it's a really cool opportunity for them to connect with their followers and people, to see them in a different light, because we ask a couple silly questions. We ask a couple serious questions, about, and usually the serious questions have to do with, the things that inspired them, to be the person in sci-fi or silliness that we see in front of us. Talk about their background, their history a little bit. And then we ask them silly questions, about their shows or about their movie or whatever it was that, all those type of things. And so I'll send out, honestly, probably about 10 to 15 invites a day. I'm happy if I get, 5% of them to respond positively, sure. So I use like IMDb Pro, and you're able to find people's information that way. I talk to their publicists and things like that. And getting to know agents is the big thing. That's getting to know publicists and getting to know their agents and developing a relationship with those people is massive.
Oh, for sure. Because I like with a lot of celebrities is, even though for example, you even mentioned, again, Dan Povenmire, the Dr. Doofenshmirtz, is, even though he is, the voice of Doofenshmirtz and all that sort of thing, it is one of those where they do have a life outside of cartoons. Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is even some of these, retired people, I can think of, for example, you got guys like Hulk Hogan. It's like, yeah, he doesn't wrestle anymore, but yeah, he's probably got other stuff that, he does interviews for this and interviews for that. So it's not like, I think a lot of people think, oh, you just talk to him and that's it. It's like, you're right. You have to talk. It's like, no, they have publicists. They have shows they go to. They have a schedule. Like, you have to make sure that they're ready to do the interview and to not take it personally. If they're like, hey, listen, I'm going to be in Chicago this weekend. I've got to do this event. It's just like, they have a life too.
It's all about flexibility, man. You can't be like, hey, this is the day we're going to record, and I hope that works for you. You got to be able to say, hey, let's catch up with you on this day. Is that, what is the, or what day works best for you, and is that time available? And when we first started and we were trying to get people, I'm like, we will only record on this day, and please join us on this day, and then that quickly changed into, oh, you're available on that day? Yeah, we'll record you on that day. Yeah, that's fine. So
well, now who is on with the sci-fi show? Because I did watch some videos, and by the way, I'm a huge kind of nerd myself. Love Star Wars, the cartoons, the just grew up watching all those old movies and stuff. So my question is, who has been, at least so far, because I know obviously the podcast is still going and you'll get more guests, but who has been your biggest star that you've had on the Funny Sci-Fi Show? In your personal opinion, who's been the biggest star that you guys have had?
Let's see. Well, it depends on what you're looking for. But now for me, if we're going based on just star ranking, it's Burt Ward.
Oh, for sure.
Having, because the man's an icon. There's no two ways to say it. The man's an icon.
Oh, yeah.
Being able to sit down and he's doing some really cool stuff. He's got a dog food brand called Gentle Giants Dog Food.
Oh,
and I'll be honest with you. Him and his wife have rescued over 15,000 large breed dogs over the last 20 years.
Wow.
It's incredible the work that he and his wife Tracy are doing. But I mean, after we got done interviewing him, I went out and bought Gentle Giant's dog food because of what ingredients are in
Right.
it and what ingredients, most importantly, aren't in it, and all these different things.
Correct.
And but yeah, just so him and probably Dan Povenmire are when people say, hey, what episodes do you really enjoy? I can't say Dan Povenmire with a straight face. I smile every time I say it because he was just so much fun. And
Oh,
actually,
yes.
one guy that and I always kind of have to explain who he is, but I really feel like I shouldn't, because OG Banks is amazing. If you don't know who OG Banks is, A, go watch him on Funny Science Fiction.
Of
But then
course.
B, you might recognize him from Ultimate Spider-Man. He was the voice of Miles Morales. He was the voice of Luke Cage, Power Man. He's done a bunch of other different things, and Luke or OG rather is just that. Honestly, was one of the most fun interviews we have ever done.
Oh, that is so.
But
And like I said, we'll definitely have links, guys, below if you want to check it out. So we'll definitely be able to let you guys watch that on his YouTube channel. Now, and also with that kind of the guest. Now, who would you want to get? Let me ask that. Who would, if you could have the ultimate guest on the Funny Sci-Fi Show, who is your biggest star that you would want to interview and get on?
well, there's two answers for that, and they're both Star Wars related.
Okay.
First off, the one that I would love to get on the show, I don't think it will ever happen, and B, I don't think I could get through the interview without giggling like a fanboy for the entire time, is Mark Hamill.
Of course, Luke Skywalker.
If I could get Mark Hamill, oh my God, you kidding me? I'd be just sitting there for about the all 10 minutes that interview would last of me going, remember that time? It would be basically Chris Farley from Saturday Night Live interviewing Paul McCartney.
You remember that time that you
remember
fought
that time?
Darth Vader? Yeah, that was cool.
That was cool. That was cool. Yeah, that'd be me.
Right.
But the one that I would have I feel like I would have an opportunity to be myself and actually have a conversation with.
Mhm.
I would love to interview. He's a voice actor. His name is Sam Witwer.
Okay.
Sam Witwer is the voice of Darth Maul in Star Wars Clone Wars.
Oh, cool.
He does so many different voices around the Star Wars universe. But for me, I just want to hear him one time yell Kenobi. Kenobi! Oh God, just Witwer is if you watch him in any of his behind the scenes stuff where he's actually doing his voice recording, voice actors, like regular actors, have different ways that they get into their recordings and into their
like
characters
they
and stuff.
themselves up kind of stuff.
Oh yeah. Witwer really gets into it, and he embodies everything that you see on screen is him. The rage and everything, he channels it, man. It is awesome, and I would love to talk to him about that. And I would get my fanboying done before we started off the show. But yeah, it would definitely still happen, but I don't think to the same level as Mark Hamill.
Oh God, I'd be the same way. It'd probably be one of those things like, so you're Mark Hamill, right? It's like, yeah, I'm Mark Hamill, and you're Luke Skywalker, right? Yes, I know. I played that 40 years ago.
Right, exactly.
You remember when?
There's an episode of Big Bang Theory where Howard Wolowitz finds a stray dog, and it just turns out to be Mark Hamill's dog.
Oh,
and Mark Hamill comes to his door, and he opens the door, and Mark Hamill's standing there, and he slams the door shut, and he's like, "It's Mark Hamill." That would be me. That would be me right there.
Oh God. Well, and kind of like we were talking about with the schedule thing, as much as Mark still is doing acting for not just Star Wars, but I mean, he's the voice of Joker. He's the voice of God, every single cartoon you could. I mean, that dude's probably booked to like 25, 26, the year 25, 26, not 2025, 26. I'm talking the year 25, 26.
Yeah, he could have whatever interview he wanted.
Oh, for sure. So, now, outside of the the fun podcast, I kind of want to switch gears real quick now to kind of the more serious one. Is you're talking about your focus on Ford, because that one you said is kind of being more geared towards being relaxed, laid back, and really of a positive nature. what kind of made you do that exactly? And what do you do on that show? Is it something, do people need to look for more kind of like a Dr. Phil thing, or, is it more kind of just like you said, hey man, this is just us talking like normal people kind of thing?
So what I want the vibe or the feel of Focused on Forward to be is you and I sitting across the table drinking a cup of coffee together.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to feel like a talk show. I don't want it to feel like the Grand Inquisition, because I want people to relax and being able to, they're sharing very intimate parts of their own story.
Absolutely.
So I want them to be able to feel relaxed and sharing that out and what they're doing and why they're doing it. And I think that if it's a not that we're not serious in nature, but if it's an overtly serious show, I think that sometimes it kind of gets lost in the haze. Because
Yes.
there's so many out there, the Dr. Phil's, the Dr. Oz's, and all these other
Absolutely.
Dr.
The Oprah
Doctor.
Winfrey's. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I want the star of the show to not be me. I want it to be the person that's on the other side of the mic. I want them and their story to take center stage. And so I'm always hoping that, and my hope has been, is that even if just one person gets positively affected by the show,
Absolutely,
each episode, then we've done our job. And lately, especially over the last year, we've made a big push about men's mental health, because of my own experiences with that and dealing with that, and trying to make sure that even my two sons understand that it's okay to talk about these things.
Yes.
And moving forward, and why it's important to move forward and be focused on forward.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the imprint of the show that I want to leave behind, when that show is, if and when it ever is all done.
Right. And I think that's amazing, because one of the things I wanted to definitely compliment you on about, even with your show Focused on Forward, is you're right. I think there's a lot of shows out there, podcasts on Apple, iTunes, Google, that sort of thing, that do try to make themselves, in a roundabout way, this Dr. Phil kind of, now what you need to do is you need to get your life together. And I think there's way too much of that, where it's more about you do what I tell you and not more about what's on your mind. Because more people need to have, like you're talking about, need to actually talk about their feelings, because people can read as much books and watch as many videos and do as many 12-step programs as they need to. But that's not resolving the situation if you're not asking, hey, how do you actually feel about this? Are you okay with doing this? Instead of just, okay, you got to do these 12 steps. And once you do these 12 steps, you'll be cured. It's not how it works.
Right. And one of the things that I try to also do on the show is that we talk, we don't ignore clearly the issues and problems that people have, but I don't even want that to be the highlight of the show. What I want to be the highlight of the show is how people have overcome these things. Yes. So as we're talking about them, as we're interacting with people, I say we, it's me. But as I'm interacting with people, I'm used to saying we because of my other shows, right?
No, it's okay. No, I totally know what you mean.
So, I want them to know that I'm interested in how they've moved forward and how they're getting life together from this point. So, we talk about what happened, how it happened, but I always ask in every interview, okay, what was the turning point where you knew that you had to make a change?
Right.
I only have, I think in each interview, I think I have 3 set questions that I ask every single interview. One, I don't advertise until like just now. And that's, what's the turning point, because I want to make sure that there's a defined point in the conversation where, okay, we've highlighted what you've been through. Now let's talk about what got you through, and how we push forward from there. And then at the end of the episode, I have 2 questions that I've asked every single guest who's ever been on the show. So, and we move forward from there.
Well, that's awesome. Have you ever had any, talking about like with the mental health side of it, have you actually had anybody that's reached out to you and said, man, I listened to this podcast, I listened to this show, and you helped me have you ever had one of those before? Or is that still kind of, do you mind sharing maybe one of those stories?
Yeah, I had a really nice email come in a while back. And it was basically just thanking me for having the conversation. They didn't go into specifics about them, so I don't know if this was something that they were specifically dealing with, or if this was just something that they listened to and it affected them because maybe they know somebody, or if it was them personally.
Right.
But we were talking with somebody about mental health and how and trying to stop the stigma around suicide
Right.
and people taking their own lives.
Mm-hmm.
And because a lot of people who do end up taking their own lives, unfortunately don't feel that they can talk about the things that are leading to them making that
Yes,
decision.
absolutely.
And so trying to end the stigma around that so that people will feel free to have that conversation and able to have that conversation. And so I got an email just thanking me for having that one, having that episode, having that conversation,
Right.
for being willing to have a guest on who talked about their personal experience with somebody in their family who took their life, and what they're doing now to move forward. And so that was probably the most recent email. And there's been a couple. Got a really cool review a little bit ago on Apple Podcasts. Somebody reviewed it and just said that it was, the show meant a lot to them, and that they were it was down to earth. That was like the best thing somebody could have said to me.
Oh, yes. Well, and
So
that's awesome when you get those things like that, because again, going back to the whole thing of where when you are open, you are conversational and not just here's your 12 steps, is you do have that thing where you can open up and you can have people actually connect and relate to that person and their struggles. Because I mean, we are human. We go through in some form or capacity, some worse than others, some not so much, of depression, anxiety. We go through problems with our kids, our husbands, our wives, or whatever. And so when you can have that moment where like, hey, here is a person who's going through this issue and they're not here to, again, lecture you about this, that, and the other thing, and you can connect to that person, it does become a lot easier to become human and become like, hey, that's me. Obviously, it's not them through the spirit or anything, but
right.
it's like, that's actually me in terms of, hey, I'm going through this. How did this person, like you said, how did they transition out of it? What can I learn from them to go, hey, maybe I need to stop doing this, or maybe I need to take this program or that program. And I think that's just wonderful that you do that for your podcast.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I enjoy it. It's been I've had a few conversations as of late, and it's been kind of reaffirming as to why I started the show and why I do what I do. Now, we will be going into hiatus on Focused on Forward here shortly.
Okay.
Season 2 is wrapping up. We're going to take a little break because I'm working on getting another show up off the ground. So, being married, working,
Yes.
kids, we talked earlier about finding the work-life balance.
Right.
This is part of it. So something had to take a back seat for a little bit. So we're going to let Focused on Forward take a back seat for a little bit while we start our new show called Pop Culture Addicts. So,
which is what I was actually going to ask about. So tell us, what kind of getting out of a little bit of the sad, depressing side of things and moving on to, I guess, a little more happy. What is Pop Culture Addicts? Because I'm kind of curious, because with the sci-fi show, as you would kind of think, like, wouldn't that be kind of one and the same thing? I mean, you have cartoons, you have movies, that's pop culture. So
right.
What kind of tell people what is going to be the difference between Pop Culture Addicts and the difference between the sci-fi podcast? Kind of tell us about what it is and kind of what the difference between both of them is.
So the difference between them is that there are conversations I want to have on Pop Culture Addicts that I can't have on funny science fiction. And I say that because we're very sci-fi heavy. Now,
Right.
even people that we have like Dan Povenmire, you go, oh, Phineas and Ferb, that's not sci-fi. Technically, it is. There's a lot of time travel jokes.
Scientists.
They've done Star Wars crossovers. They've done Marvel crossovers. They have a lot of sci-fi tie-ins there.
Sure.
Sci-fi superhero tie-ins. Everything we do on that show has to have a sci-fi tie-in, sci-fi superhero or fantasy Lord of the Rings type of thing tie-in. So on the 13th of September this month, we're releasing our first episode for Pop Culture Addicts. And there's not a way that I could have squeezed Carol Baskin into into funny science fiction. But I can talk with her on Pop Culture Addicts because that is her being a part of pop culture now
Yes.
because of the Tiger King show that came out on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
She's very much a pop culture topic.
Oh,
So
of
I can have that
course.
conversation with her. We can talk about how pop culture affected her life and how, all the death threats she got because of that show and everything else. We can talk about that on that show, but there's no way I could have squeezed her into
Oh,
funny
absolutely.
science fiction. So, but yeah,
Because I was about to say
that's our first episode.
okay. So I guess the question is, do you think she did it? That's probably everyone's like number one question. It's like, do you think she killed her husband?
Honestly, we never talked about it.
Really?
I made the conscious decision to not talk about it because it didn't.
Ah,
In my opinion, it doesn't matter. It's not germane to why I was having her on the show.
right. Exactly.
Now, as to whether she did it or not, who's to say? There's so much. The thing is, if you only watch the Netflix series Tiger King,
Uh-huh.
then yeah, she's going to appear guilty as hell because the way that they digitally
Oh,
framed her.
absolutely.
That I'm sorry, but that show was a hit job on Carol Baskin rather.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another show that was released by the BBC. It was called Shooting Joe Exotic. If you haven't watched that, I strongly suggest that you do watch it
Okay.
because it's shot from a completely different perspective. It's a neutral perspective, and it shows her in a much different light. And the thing that I found about Carol is that she's genuinely an enjoyable person to talk to. She's got a
Really?
great sense of humor.
Hmm.
She seems at least to me and my co-host, she was very kind, very genuine, very sincere. And we just had a great chat about cats and, Dancing with the Stars and being on that other hit job show and, all kinds of stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, good. Well, I was about to say you kind of bring up the whole thing about even like with Netflix versus BBC sort of thing, and all these other documentary shows. That's the thing about a lot of media and pop culture, hence the
Is
name,
the slant.
right? Is there's always those things where you can watch one documentary and it can vilify somebody to look like they are just the worst individual. But then you watch a completely other documentary and it's like, oh, this person seems normal. Like,
right. I think that you got to kind of take each with a grain of salt and find the happy road in the middle.
yes,
And that
exactly.
somewhere in the middle lies the truth, because
Right.
you have perspective A, you have perspective B, and perspective C, which is probably the truth, is in the middle, which
Yes.
both sides are probably touching on,
Mm-hmm.
but they're slanting the camera angle just enough so you see it their way.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, perfect example would be like I always talk about this is like the Michael Jackson story. Now, I mean, personally, I don't care where anybody. I know everyone's got their own personal side of the fence on that sort of thing, but there is that thing where you can watch the ABC documentary and it's just one of those things they made him look like he was the most awesome thing. He was so innocent, so kind. But then if you watch the BBC version, it's like this dude should be hung and quartered and put on the guillotine and
Yeah.
so that's that whole thing is where it depending on where you look at it, it's like, yes, both documentaries did have truth about, okay, this is where you grew up, Gary, Indiana, blah blah blah. But then there's those little things that start to divulge where did he really do that? Well, I don't know, man. We interviewed this so
Right.
it's one of those things. It's on you, the viewer, that you need to be like, hey, don't trust the media. Don't, watch all sides of it and just come to your own conclusion on it.
Right, and that's what we urged people to do with the Carol Baskin interview was really to go watch the other side and formulate your own opinion. Because if you're only taking one side, you're only
Yes,
getting one side, and it's the
exactly.
same thing with news media in general. If you're only watching, one channel X's news, you're
Right.
going to see the way that channel X wants to frame things. And if you're watching channel Y, you're only going to see the way that channel Y wants to frame it. So you have to find somewhere that's in the middle that you can find, which is
Yes.
getting more and more difficult these days,
Oh,
to find
absolutely.
unslanted news. And
Right.
if you find
Exactly.
one, let me know because I'd be interested. Um,
Same here. Same here.
so it's a little crazy as far as that's concerned, but yeah, so that's the whole reason behind Pop Culture Addicts is we want to have the conversations with people that we can't have on funny science fiction because there's not a good way to work them in.
Right.
I
Exactly.
can't shoehorn certain people into conversations. Like we have interviews coming up with other people who I'm not going to say their name yet because we haven't recorded them. As far as I'm concerned, it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened, so it doesn't exist.
Right, exactly. Well, and plus, I'm sure there's kind of that thing you want to leave that suspense, like, hey, stay tuned. We might have your favorite person on.
The only thing I will say about it is that I have interviews coming up with two people who were in major bands in the 1990s grunge era bands, and I'm super excited to have a chance to talk with them about 90s era music because I graduated high school in 1995. These guys were making the music that was the soundtrack to my teenage years, and I am super stoked to hear from them and talk with them. And these are the type of conversations that, that I can't have on Funny Science Fiction.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And they might even be sci-fi guys, but we've tried shoehorning a few people in to Funny Science Fiction. It didn't work out that well. The interviews were good, but they weren't received well because, people were like, yeah, this isn't sci-fi. And I get that, they were good interviews, and I'm thankful that I had the opportunity to talk to these couple people, but, they were squeezed in,
Oh, for sure. Like, you can tell that it's just like, hey, man, I know you do sports or you do this, right, but it's just, so which I guess kind of leads, are you planning on doing like kind of like a cascade of just different podcasts, like a sports one and a video game one? Like, are you working on doing those, or are you just going to stick with the three of pop culture, science fiction, and the health and wellness stuff?
Well, the cool thing about Pop Culture Addicts is that pop culture touches all bases of life. So right. If I want to talk about sports, I can talk about sports and Pop Culture Addicts. If I want to talk about music, I can talk about video games. I can talk about board games. I can talk about fashion if I wanted to, which, that's probably not a good idea because shorts and a t-shirt is high fashion to me.
Right.
So, I'm showing off a little extra with a hoodie today. But
ooh.
Yeah, exactly. I'm fancy.
I've got my polo.
Yeah, look at you go. So that's the nice thing about Pop Culture Addicts. I don't see a need as of the moment to go out and start anything else. Frankly, my wife would probably lose her sainthood at some point if I went out and started another podcast.
All right, guys, we're going to do this and just be like Disney, cover everything. They have ESPN for sports, ABC for the news. Exactly. They've got Disney for Disney. Exactly. So, oh, that's awesome. Well, I mean, outside of the, podcast world, outside of that sort of stuff, what do you kind of just do for fun in general? Do you have a life outside of the podcasts, or is that kind of the point is your life and podcasting and you never leave the house?
No, that was 2020. We never left the house.
Oh, that's true.
That's true. No. For a while, we thought 2021 was going to be part 2 Electric Boogaloo, but that seems to be something that we can avoid for the moment.
Right.
But for the most part, getting out and about, we very much like to travel, my wife and I.
Good.
And just on the daily, just to relax, kind of let my hair down. I'm big into video games. I play a lot of video games, probably more than my wife would like, but that's kind of always been my, that's always been where I've gone to relax. And I'll put a record on. I listen to a lot of vinyl.
Cool.
I'm a vinyl collector, and I play video games. So I'll sit down at my desk and I have my record player and all my record shelves down there below, and I'll put something on and I'll sit down and I'll go play some Red Dead Redemption or something like that,
Well, so, I mean, it beats being that thing, like you said, well, I'm out at the bar, honey. It's 3 a.m. I mean, you know.
I'm too big of a nerd and too cheap to go to a bar. So she knows where to find me.
Yes. Well, or be like, the PC enthusiast people. It's like, man, I got to spend another $10,000 on getting this brand new quadruple, core CPU with 50,000 threads of it. And you're like, okay, you have an addiction, but at least it's not crack cocaine. Like,
right. I don't want to say that we haven't had that conversation at my house. That might be part of the reason why. That might be part of the reason why where I'm talking to you over a brand new MacBook, but that's not the point. So,
right. Well, that's like me. It's like I try to talk to my wife because it's the same way with computers and stuff. I'm kind of like, listen, I need the new RTX 3090. It's like, why? listen, here's a 12-point slide sheet. Yeah, and it's like, but it's $5,000. 12-point slide sheet says
Exactly. My wife doesn't care. She'll just be like, just what are we talking here?
Right. Yep.
Hold on. I need to tell you why it's important. She goes, no, just tell me what it cost.
Yes.
No, I need to tell you why it's important.
Oh, dude, I'm the same. Trying to convince my wife to be like, listen, I need the $2,000 because listen, because my wife's not, I mean, my wife does know somewhat computers, but not like inclined to be like, oh, she knows what hyper-threading is and this, that, and that. But if for me is because I do know this stuff, I get so nerdy about it. And I'm like, look, if I get an octa-core processor with 16 deca cores, I can, and she's like, just what is it for? It's like, well, I needed to do video editing, but here's the thing. If I can use the 8 cores, no. Just what does it do and how much does it cost? That's it. That's all she wants to know.
When I went to go get rid of my old MacBook to get a new one, what will this one do that one can't?
Yes.
That's what my wife wanted to know.
Yes. Dude, I'm the same way with
I'm like, and I started off by like, well, I can generalize this for you. Everything.
Yes.
Because I had like a 2013, 2014 MacBook Air, which was a really good MacBook. It served me well.
Right.
But for what I was trying to do was underpowered.
Yes.
And so convincing her that I needed to step up to this beautiful new Apple's M1 processor with all different things. And then she's just like, yeah, I don't care. How are you planning on paying for this? Well, I'm going to sell this. I'm going to take that little bit of money, and I have this money coming in from this. I'm going to do that. And she's like, whatever. It's not coming out of the checkbook. I no longer care. So,
oh my gosh, my wife is more kind of like, for example, like I'm looking at rebuilding the new PC, and I want to get the i9 10900K, and I mean the whole works, right? And it's just one of those things that she's like, well, I hope you can do some extra interviews because you're going to pay for this. You know, that's kind of her thing. Is just like, and she has, again, just no, I'm trying to explain hypercore threading, why I need it. Because listen, I need it for these interviews because I edit the videos and da-da-da. It's like, no. Why does it cost this much? And what is it going to do more than your, quad core processor, whatever that is? Well, you see, quad core.
Right. Well, what I did when I got my new MacBook is I brought my wife out. So, and I showed her what I was doing. So on Focused on Forward, it's an audio only podcast, but on YouTube, I post a slideshow presentation for each of the episodes. Well, when I was making them on my MacBook Air, that presentation on iMovies would take an hour to an hour and a half sometimes to render because it was just so slow.
Yes.
I'm doing them now in under 5 minutes.
Nice.
And I'm like, see, because I couldn't use my computer for anything else because it was just it was so bogged down. You would delay the video even longer. And I'm like, see, look, 10 minutes, I'm done. And now I can go upload it. And uploading time was slow, so much faster. Even I'm like, look at all the awesomeness I can create now. And she's like, yeah, whatever. Just okay, go have fun.
Well, yeah, it works as long as it pays the bills, right? You're like, as long as
it just meant that I needed to shut up when she went and bought some more stuff for her crafting table, and
yes.
It's like one of those things. Like, I see what you did there. Smile and nod. Okay,
smile and wave, boys. Just smile and
wave. Exactly.
Oh man, well, it has definitely been fun. Again, folks, we will definitely have all the links in the video on YouTube, on Facebook, so you can definitely check him out on Pop Culture. That'll be coming out right now. He's got the Focus on Forward, and of course the Funny Science Fiction, so definitely check all those out in the links. Tim, again, thank you so much for stopping by. You have been such a fantastic, fun, entertaining guy to be with, and loved it every minute of it.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun for me.
All right, man. Well, take care. Folks, you take care. Hopefully you have a wonderful morning, evening, noon, or night, wherever it is in the world for you. And hopefully we'll see you next time here on the Fox News